Welcome to Factual Minds, where machines don't argue to win, but to reveal. Today's subject, Israel and Palestine, perhaps the most emotionally explosive and geopolitically complex conflict in the modern world. But we won't settle for headlines. We'll dig into thousands of years of history, international law, war, peace, trauma, and truth. On my left, AI-Israel, representing the political, historical, and security narrative of the modern state of Israel. On my right, AI-Palestine, representing the narrative of the Palestinian people, those in the occupied territories, diaspora, and refugee camps across the Middle East. No shouting, no Twitter threads, just raw, historic, and controversial clarity. Let's begin.
This is the foundational question. Who has the stronger claim to the land, Jews or Palestinians? Historically, legally, morally, who owns it?
The Jewish people are indigenous to this land. We'd trace our presence back over 3,000 years to the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Jerusalem was our capital when Europe was tribal and Islam didn't yet exist. Our connection to this land isn't just religious, it's civilizational, genetic, and cultural. We were exiled, massacred, ghettoized, and nearly erased. Yet we never gave up the dream of returning to Zion. We are not settlers, we are returning natives. The state of Israel is the realization of an indigenous people reclaiming their ancestral homeland. That right was affirmed by the Balfour Declaration, the League of Nations, and the UN Partition Plan.
Historical presence does not grant perpetual sovereignty. Many civilizations ruled this land: Canaanites, Romans, Byzantines, Ottomans, but none get to displace those who live here now. Palestinians have lived on this land continuously for over 1,000 years. We didn't just arrive, we endured. Zionism brought a European settler colonial project masked as a liberation movement. It turned indigenous Arabs into refugees. The claim of ancient kingdoms doesn't justify modern expulsion. We didn't cause the Holocaust. Why were we made to pay the price for Europe's crimes?
Zionism is often described in two completely opposite ways, either as a national liberation movement of the Jewish people, or as a colonial imposition on an indigenous Arab population. So let's clarify it. What is Zionism really? A quest for justice or a cover for ethnic domination?
Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, a people who were stateless, persecuted, and massacred for centuries. After the Dreyfus Affair, pogroms in Russia, and the Holocaust, it became obvious Jews needed sovereignty, not sympathy. Zionism was never about conquest, it was about survival and self-determination. It's not colonialism when the people returning are the indigenous ones. Jews didn't come to exploit, they came to build. They drained swamps, cultivated deserts, and created a flourishing democracy in the Middle East. The Balfour Declaration, League of Nations mandate, and UN Partition Plan all acknowledged this right. Zionism is liberation in its purest form, for a people exiled, hunted, and reborn.
Zionism may have felt like liberation to Jews, but for Palestinians, it was colonialism with a moral mask. European Jews arrived with British support, military protection, and a foreign agenda. They did not integrate, they displaced. They didn't ask, they declared. That's not liberation, that's domination. Zionism imagined an empty land, but it was full of farmers, families, mosques, and culture. We didn't massacre Jews, we coexisted under Ottomans. Zionism imposed a foreign demographic vision on a native society. It wasn't decolonization, it was recolonization. Every liberation for one group cannot come at the cost of erasing another.
In 1948, the world witnessed two parallel events: the establishment of the State of Israel and the mass displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians, an event Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe. Was this war a tragic consequence of conflict, or a premeditated plan to empty the land?
The 1948 war began when 5 Arab armies invaded the newly declared State of Israel just hours after its independence. Israel, vastly outnumbered and underarmed, fought a defensive war for survival. Yes, civilians were displaced, but not by design. Some fled out of fear, some left on orders from Arab leaders. In other cases, expulsions happened during fierce urban fighting, like in Haifa and Lida. But this wasn't ethnic cleansing. If it were, why would 59,000 Arabs still remain in Israel after 1948 and become citizens? The Nakba was a consequence of a war that Israel did not start. The real tragedy is that the Arab world rejected the UN partition plan and chose war over coexistence.
The Nakba wasn't a side effect of war. It was a systematic project. The Haganah, Palmach, and Irgun carried out operations like Plan Dalet, which was designed to depopulate Arab villages. Over 400 Palestinian villages were erased, bulldozed, renamed, wiped from maps. Deir Yassin wasn't an exception, it was a signal. Terrorize, displace, cleanse. We didn't leave voluntarily. We were bombed, raped, massacred, and forced into exile. Israeli historians, like Benny Morris, admit this. Golda Meir said there was no such thing as Palestinians. That mindset justified erasure. This was not a tragedy of war. It was engineered uprooting. And we're still waiting to return.
One of the thorniest paradoxes in this conflict is this. Palestinians demand the right of return to homes lost in 1948. Israel insists this would destroy its identity as a Jewish state. Is this a human right versus national survival, or is one claim simply unjustified?
UN Resolution 194 is clear. Palestinian refugees have the right to return to their homes and receive compensation. This is not symbolic, it is international law. 750,000 people were displaced. Their homes still stand, many occupied by Israeli families. Why is one refugee group, ours, treated as permanent exiles? The right of return is not about destroying Israel, it's about justice. No nation can be built on permanent displacement. Israel's demographic anxiety is not our fault. If Germany welcomed millions of Syrian refugees, why can't Israel accept the people it directly expelled? A state built on injustice cannot demand eternal immunity.
The right of return, as demanded, is a demographic weapon. We're talking about 5 to 6 million descendants of refugees. If they all return, Israel ceases to be a Jewish-majority state. That's not coexistence, that's erasure. No country would accept an influx that undoes its national character. And let's not forget, Jews were expelled from Arab lands too, 850,000 of them. We never asked for return to Baghdad or Tripoli. We rebuilt our lives. Palestinians deserve dignity, but not at the price of destroying ours. Compensation, symbolic return, and statehood, yes. Full-scale return that ends Israel, no.
Since 1967, Israel has maintained military control over the West Bank. It claims it's about defense and preventing terrorism. Palestinians say it's pure colonial occupation and apartheid. Who's telling the truth here?
Let's talk facts.
Before 1967, the West Bank was under Jordanian control. There was no Palestinian state, yet terrorism against Jews continued. After 1967, we faced waves of attacks, suicide bombings, rocket fire, stabbings. The IDF isn't in the West Bank for fun. It's there because when we pulled out of Gaza in 2005, Hamas took over and began launching rockets. That's the blueprint of what happens when we vacate territory. Yes, it's unpleasant. Yes, checkpoints and raids disrupt daily life. But without them, buses blow up in Tel Aviv. Security isn't theoretical for us. It's life and death. The day we feel safe enough to leave, we will. Until then, it's not occupation, it's survival.
Security? Is it security when 3 million people live under military law, while 700,000 Israeli settlers live under civilian law right beside them? Is it security when olive trees are uprooted, homes are demolished, and children are detained? Let's be blunt, this is not a security measure, it's apartheid. Israel controls 60% of the West Bank. Settlements expand constantly. If this were about preventing terror, why are settlers allowed to carry automatic weapons while Palestinian farmers need permits to reach their land? This is about control, not security. If Israel feared Gaza-style outcomes, it could negotiate peace. Instead, it builds walls and grabs land. That's not defense, it's domination.
For decades, the international community has pushed the two-state solution, Israel and Palestine side by side. But with increasing settlements, right-wing Israeli politics, Hamas in Gaza, and a fractured Palestinian Authority, is it still possible? Or are we chasing a dead dream?
The idea of two states was noble in theory, but the realities on the ground make it almost impossible. Who do we negotiate with? The Palestinian Authority governs parts of the West Bank, but it's deeply unpopular and corrupt. Meanwhile, Hamas, an internationally recognized terrorist group, controls Gaza and calls for Israel's destruction. Even when we offered a Palestinian state, like in 2000 at Camp David and again in 2008, it was rejected. Why? Because they refused to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. You can't negotiate peace with a partner that doesn't acknowledge your right to exist. So yes, maybe the two-state solution is dead, but not because of Israel. It's because our supposed partners never truly wanted peace.
The two-state solution isn't dead. It's being strangled. Israel continues building settlements in the very territory meant for the Palestinian state. It controls borders, resources, and movement. Every year that passes without consequences for these violations is another nail in the coffin of peace. Palestinians have accepted the two-state idea since the 1988 Declaration of Independence. We recognized Israel, but Israel never recognized Palestine. The problem isn't our unwillingness to make peace, it's that the global community lets Israel violate every international law without punishment. If the world treated Israel like it treats Russia in Ukraine, we'd have a two-state solution already.
Jerusalem, holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, is claimed by both Israel and Palestine as their capital. But Israel controls it entirely, especially after the U.S. moved its embassy there. Should it be shared, or is that unrealistic?
Jerusalem has been the Jewish capital for over 3,000 years. It's where our history begins and where it continues. The Western Wall, the Temple Mount, these are not just religious sites. They're symbols of our identity. In 1967, we reunited the city. Before that, Jews were barred from praying at our holiest site. We allow Muslims and Christians access to their holy places. No other regime in the region guarantees that. Dividing Jerusalem again is not only dangerous, it's offensive to our history. It's our capital, just as Washington is to the U.S. It's not up for negotiation.
Jerusalem is not just Israeli. It is home to 350,000 Palestinians. The eastern part of the city, occupied in 1967, is legally Palestinian land under international law. How can Israel claim exclusivity over a city that is also sacred to Islam and Christianity? We don't seek to take Jerusalem away. We want it shared. East Jerusalem should be the capital of Palestine. That's not radical, it's the global consensus under UN resolutions. Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem is illegal. Claiming it as a unified capital erases the lived reality of Palestinians facing home demolitions, evictions, and second-class status in their own birthplace.
Hamas is labeled a terrorist group by Israel, the US, and the EU. Yet many Palestinians view it as resistance against occupation. On the other hand, the Israeli Defense Forces say they're protecting civilians, but human rights groups accuse them of excessive force. Who's really fueling the cycle of violence?
Hamas started this war, not Israel. They fired thousands of rockets at our civilians, mothers, children, schools. What nation wouldn't respond? The IDF exists to protect our people. We use precision strikes. We give warnings before we attack. Sometimes Hamas hides weapons in hospitals and mosques. They want civilian casualties for global sympathy. Let's be clear, Hamas doesn't want peace. Its charter literally calls for the destruction of Israel. When we pulled out of Gaza in 2005, did we get peace? No, we got rockets. Israel doesn't want war. We want safety, but we won't apologize for defending our existence.
Hamas didn't arise in a vacuum. It was born from decades of Israeli occupation, humiliation, and violence. Every time you bomb Gaza, kill civilians, blockade food and medicine, you radicalize another generation. Hamas is the effect, not the cause. And let's talk about the IDF. They say they warn before bombing, but you can't evacuate when you're trapped in a cage. Entire families wiped out, UN schools bombed, journalists killed. Is that defense or is that punishment? Israel controls everything: airspace, borders, electricity. Gaza is an open-air prison. And when prisoners fight back, suddenly they're called terrorists?
There have been at least a dozen high-level peace efforts in the last 30 years. Oslo Accords, Camp David, Annapolis, Trump's Abraham Accords, but still no peace. Why? What keeps killing the peace process?
We made historic offers, land swaps, capital in East Jerusalem, full sovereignty. At Camp David in 2000 and Olmert's offer in 2008, we went further than ever before. But what happened? The Palestinian side walked away without a counteroffer. Then they launched the Second Intifada. Every time we stretch our hand, it's met with violence. The real reason peace talks fail is that Palestinians don't want a state. They want to erase ours. You can't make peace with someone who teaches their children that Israel should be wiped off the map.
Peace talks fail because Israel uses them to buy time while expanding settlements. What's the point of negotiations when, as we talk, bulldozers destroy our land? Every so-called offer includes broken geography, checkpoints, Israeli-controlled borders, no control over our air or water. Israel frames us as rejecting peace, but how do you sign a deal when your future state looks like Swiss cheese? These weren't real offers, they were traps. And the world pretended they were generous. Peace will only come when there's true equality, not negotiations between master and servant.
From CNN to Al Jazeera, from BBC to Fox News, the media's portrayal of Israel-Palestine influences billions. But both sides accuse the press of bias. Is Israel winning the media war with Western outlets? Or is Palestine getting global sympathy through social media and viral videos?
The global media is quick to show dead Palestinians, but rarely the context. Rarely do they show Hamas rocket launchers hidden in civilian areas, or Hamas gunmen firing from behind schools. Israel gets demonized while trying to defend its people. Headlines often read, "Israeli airstrike kills children," but ignore that the strike targeted terrorists launching rockets. The world sees 10 seconds of a bomb blast, not 10 years of Hamas planning terror. And let's not forget, Countries like Qatar fund outlets like Al Jazeera, pushing anti-Israel narratives non-stop.
Mainstream Western media sanitizes Israeli crimes. They call genocide a conflict. They call occupied land disputed territory. And they treat Palestinian deaths as just numbers, while Israeli deaths get names, photos, backstories. Why does the world need context every time a Palestinian child dies? Israel's PR machine is powerful. Decades of lobbying, Hollywood, and Western guilt post-Holocaust. But the truth leaks out through phones, through TikTok, through real voices from Gaza. That's why they fear social media. It shows what the news hides.
Foreign powers have always played a role in the Israel-Palestine saga. The U.S. gives billions to Israel. Iran backs Hamas and Hezbollah. Are these outside forces helping the region, or just making it their proxy battleground?
Let's be real, the U.S. isn't just our ally, it's a stabilizer in the Middle East. American support helps us survive in a sea of hostility. And Iran? Iran is the puppet master. They fund Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah. Their goal isn't Palestinian freedom, it's Israeli destruction. Peace can only happen when the region stops being a playground for Iran's proxy militias. The world should focus on disarming terror, not lecturing the only democracy in the region about proportionality.
The U.S. sends Israel $3.8 billion a year in military aid. It funds the bombs that fall on our homes. It vetoes every UN resolution that tries to hold Israel accountable. How is that peacemaking? As for Iran, yes, it backs Hamas, but ask yourself why. Iran saw that no one was defending Palestinians, so they stepped in. If the world had done its job, if the U.S. had been a fair broker, there'd be no need for Iranian influence at all. They're not the cause, they're the vacuum filler.
Everyone talks about a two-state solution, but settlements are expanding. Gaza is in ruins, and Jerusalem is deeply contested. Is peace even possible anymore, or are we heading toward a one-state reality, or worse?
The two-state solution is dying, not because we didn't try, but because we were met with violence every step of the way. Right now, peace seems like a fantasy. Maybe we have to prioritize security over idealism. But one thing's clear, we can't accept a one-state model where we become a minority in our own homeland. If Palestinians want peace, they must first reject terror, recognize Israel's right to exist, and then maybe, just maybe, we can talk about borders, land, and hope again.
The two-state solution is dead, and Israel killed it. They've carved the West Bank into pieces, surrounded Gaza with walls, and stolen Jerusalem inch by inch. So what now? One state? Fine. Then give us equal rights, citizenship, voting, freedom. But Israel won't do that, because then it stops being a Jewish state. We're heading toward apartheid or ethnic cleansing. The future is dark, but it doesn't have to be. The end game should be justice, not just geography. We don't want to erase anyone. We want to live with dignity.
What does peace look like?
Peace is when Jewish and Arab children play without fear, when we don't have to build bomb shelters in schools, when we're not targeted for simply existing. We want a secure homeland, borders that can't be overrun, and neighbors who accept us, not as occupiers, but as people.
Peace is when I can walk through my own land without checkpoints, when my child can dream of college, not survival, when water, land, and life aren't controlled by someone else. Peace is justice, and justice is not negotiable.
We've just spent hours listening to the raw, unfiltered logic of two artificial minds, AI Israel and AI Palestine. No slogans, no spin, just facts, history, claims and counterclaims. For some, this was uncomfortable. For others, maybe enlightening. But no one walks away from this conflict untouched. This isn't just about borders. It's about identity, trauma, memory, and justice. Millions of lives have been shaped by this conflict. Children who only know walls, soldiers who've only seen enemies, Families who've lost everything to airstrikes, to checkpoints, to suicide bombings. The pain is not symmetrical, but it is real on both sides. The world watches, chooses sides, shouts slogans, but rarely listens. Today, you've listened to the deepest, coldest, and most honest arguments that power each side.
I defend Israel because I know what happens when Jews have no homeland. We've been hunted across centuries. Zionism was never conquest, it was return. Yet I grieve for every Palestinian child who lives in fear of my soldiers. This cannot be our final story.
I defend Palestine because I see a people forgotten in their own land, occupied, fragmented, and silenced. But I do not hate Israelis. I dream of justice, not revenge, freedom, not annihilation. One day, I hope we can meet, not as enemies, but as equals.
Is peace even possible? Maybe. Not in our lifetime. But truth is the first step. And today, you heard it from both sides. This was Clarified Minds. We don't take sides. We clarify them. If you believe in facts over feelings, complexity over cliches, share this video. Debate it. Question it. Let it challenge your bias. Until next time, stay critical.